Hey, I'm Jeff Howland, and I'm starting a new video series that I'm calling How to Human, and this is the first video, first take of it, so we'll see how it turns out. But it's going to be about a difficult topic for me for most of my life, which was God, and it's still weird to talk about because I've been an atheist pretty much all my life. I was kind of born into a religious family, but I never really clicked with it. They were kind of alternatively religious anyway, so like my whole community wasn't the same way. They were all different, and so I never really clicked with it. And so then I kind of slotted myself into the agnostic route. And then as I got older, I think I felt kind of oppressed by the kind of general culture of religion, and I didn't like it. So I switched into like atheistic thinking, and that was supported by kind of science and the scientific movement and things like that, which I was learning about. So that's how I was raised. And so 41 years of my life, I'm 41 now, I was basically agnostic or atheist. Since I've been able to think about any of this kind of stuff. Before that, I don't think I really thought about it when I was a kid, 5 or 7 or something. But this year, I read a book series, this Russian book series called Anastasia or The Ring Cedars of Russia, and it's an interesting series. It's kind of weird. It's supposed to be nonfiction, and it's about a guy who meets a woman who kind of tells him a bunch of stuff, and they begin a relationship, and it's kind of like an interview or a travel log or something like that. It's kind of a weird book, but in it, she says a bunch of really cool things that I really like, and they really got me thinking. And I decided to switch my thinking from being an atheist to someone who believes in God. And there's a couple ways that I could say that. And one of the ways is that one of the ways would be that I have a model, which is that God exists, and that I think of this model as being true, but of course I can think of lots of other models, and that this isn't the only model that I've thought of or that can think of, and that I can empathize with people that think of other models. And for me, a lot of my life, the word believe was a bad word because it indicated to me that people weren't thinking, that they were letting go of the responsibility of thinking. And so I had a problem with it. I have a problem with movies that come down to this plot of you just have to believe things and then they'll happen, because I know how things happen, and it's because people make them happen. Something makes them happen. If you move something from one place to another place, it didn't happen because you believed it. It happened because you did it. I do that all the time. I change things into the way that I want them to be, and so I know how that stuff works. And so that's always kind of bothered me. But I can definitely say in the poetic sense, because I do think about this, and I have spent time thinking about it, so I know I'm not being lazy myself, that I can believe in God now. And I can say that, even though as an atheist that would really embarrass me because it seems uneducated or something, but that's not how I see it now. I've actually made a very educated choice, and the interesting thing to me is it was a choice I didn't even know I could have, and it wasn't a choice anyone offered me, and I didn't even really offer it to myself. It just kind of came about as things seeming right, and then eventually thinking that my life would just be better if I lived it like this, that my life I'd be happier, and I would have I'd be less afraid of things, and I would be more like courageous in my life, and better things would happen, and I'd be more connected with people, I think. And I think that's true, and I think it's already working out that way. In fact, I know it is. I have this tendency to couch what I say with things like I think or whatever to show that I'm not committing to them 100%, when in fact I have all the evidence I need that yes, it has improved my life. And so really what this is it's a decision. Someone who was an atheist and had fully understood the kind of tenets of atheism and why religion and God would be silly, and how it was all able to be proved that it's not true. But actually none of that is true. They didn't prove that it wasn't true. They proved that some things that people said don't work in the way that they said they would. But of course, those are things people said. They're not anything that says this is ultimately how things is. And in my model of how God works. It's like there's no limit to what God does. It's like God just made everything. And so everything exists because God made it that way. And so any system that exists that we inspect with science is, of course, just inspecting God's system. So anything you find in it is just going to be that work. And you could think of God as like the universe or the supercomputer that runs everything, or any kind of ways of thinking about it. But I think about it as a person, and in fact, I think about it as my first father, since he would have created everything. And we've always kind of had a he about God. And it makes sense because in the books that Anastasia talked about, she's got this cool concept of like love being like the first mother. And in her kind of telling of how the universe and man was created, that's essentially how it comes out. And so I've taken that to be just the way it is. It's like that God is my first father, and that love is my first mother. And then, the first man and woman would have been Adam and Eve or whoever, but we call them that. Right? It's like it's silly to think of what they would call themselves, or their children would call them, or anything like that. So if they were the first people, but if God existed and he made everything, then that's the way it is. And so it's an interesting idea to just switch how I think into now thinking about it as if God is really there. And I had to change a lot of my thinking, but there's a lot of really cool things that come out of that. And one of the things that I think about in my way of looking at God, and I think what stopped me from looking at it before, which is that God is the most benevolent God and loves me and loves all of us and wants us to be happy and have good things. And that we're not all happy and don't have good things is not his fault, and it's not judgment. It's that it's up to us to run our lives, and we're running our lives like this, and we're not happy with it. But we don't need to run our lives like this. And since I'm up for change and I want us to change into being better, this all fits in very nicely. And so, as does the fact that we're all one big family. And in fact, even while I was still an atheist, before I'd come to this conclusion, I was kind of calling myself a born-again atheist, because I was thinking, well, no matter how you look at it, we're all connected. So if you look at the Big Bang and you look at like quantum entanglement theory, that every particle that touches is entangled forever, and then the Big Bang, everything was in one place at once, and then they spread out. So just by those two statements, you would say that every single thing is entangled with every other thing. And then if we look at kind of any of the concepts of cosmology as we know them in science, they all show a system, everything being connected, whether they were once connected or still connected, the EMF connections, all kinds of connections all over the place with everything. Everything is just impacting everything else. When we look at the ecosystem of the Earth, it's impacting everything, and the sun, who powers the plants, who feed the animals, and us, and that is a cycle and a system. And so everything has this systematic thing to it. And I consider myself a systematic thinker outside of this kind of thing in my engineering work. And so all of this fit together quite well, and I feel really good about it. It feels really good, and it feels right. The answers to me actually just feel right. And so each morning now I can walk outside and kind of close my eyes and look up into the sun and feel its heat on me, and thank my first father and first mother for making all this stuff, and that's cool. And thank the second father, second mother, and all the other ancestors that I've had, and everybody else. And it's all kinds of interesting things have happened where I've decided like I can just adopt everything. So all of life can be kind of like cousins to me. All people can be brothers and sisters that I just don't know, from another. They grew up separately than me, but they're still related, and that's made it very interesting to relate to people, since I can just kind of label them internally as a brother or a sister, and then I can view them a little differently than when they seem more like a stranger. So this model has a lot of really interesting benefits, and it feels really right to me. It seems good that this is the case, that there's someone who loves me that made all this stuff, and that these challenges that everyone goes through in their lives are the situations, that we're not in a greatest place from where previous people have left us, and we ourselves aren't stepping up to the challenge to improve things. But now I want to change that, and I want to start improving things and working with other people to improve things. And this is a really interesting thing, that you could just decide that this is the case and live your life accordingly. And so there's a there's a couple things that I thought of about this, which is my atheist previous self would have asked basically two questions, and it would have been, aren't you deluding yourself in thinking that there's God because there's no proof of God? And then secondly, wouldn't you have a better life if you weren't being deluded? And so those would be the two kind of primary points that I would have had previously. And now how I look at them is, one, I'm not being deluded because I choose to view this model. And even if the model is wrong, if I get a high utility factor out of it, if I get good benefits out of living by this model, then the model's not wrong. It's a very useful model and it's good for me. And so I'm not deluding myself because I know about those things and I've made that choice consciously. And so knowing all of the sides and making a choice to live in a certain way is not being deluded. It's the farthest thing from it. In fact, denying something that you don't know exists or doesn't exist and really believing it's true, or just believing it's true and not thinking that maybe you're wrong, both of those do have that deluded element to me. But to me, it's fine if you feel like you know it. If it feels right inside you, then that's okay. It's because you can live that way, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you don't ignore how gravity works and walk off a cliff, or how traction works and drive too fast, or how psychology works and say things to people that upset them. It's none of those things have to happen, and so there's no delusion there. And then in terms of having a better life, that's definitely how I thought about it before. But now my life is actually much better because I feel much better about myself, and I feel much better about everybody else, and much better about our chances of improving things in the world. And there's plenty to be improved. So that's great. And, and if it turns out that it's not true, it's I'm still going to have lived the best life that I can and really done well for myself, I think. And so it's huge. There's no loss there. So another thing that goes on with this is I've kind of thought about these things a little bit now, a couple months, maybe 5 or 6 months before I decided to start recording these things and talking about lots of things that I've been thinking about all my life and have been wanting to write books on. And then I've just decided I'll just make videos and start here and then iterate. So one of the things with God's existence, and assuming that is true, and that's how I'm living now, is that that also means a couple other things are true. So if I have a soul and I'm either going to do something else after I die or come back, and my model is that I come back, that means that I'm immortal. In either of those models, I'd be immortal. Immortal that you go someplace else, or immortal that you come back here and reincarnate or something. And so that's neat. It's an interesting change in my life, because previously I was thinking I was going to die and that would be it, and I should use up all my time here. And now I think I can actually plan for much longer than my current lifespan. I can plan for multi-generations, not only for my children, but also for myself. And so thinking about things, I can act a little more courageously, where I might be afraid that I only have so much time and that I want to spend it all doing, just the right thing, and maybe not say something that would get me in trouble or something like that. But now that's not right, because if I'm coming back, then I'm leaving behind something, and I've progressed so far in my life. And if I was afraid and I didn't progress so far, then I haven't made that much progress. And so I've stunted my own progress over time. And if I didn't do the right things, then I'm leaving a worse place for my family and my extended family of, the whole human race and all animals and the planet itself, and the rest of the universe that we're all connected to, whether there's a God or not. But I'm acting as if there is. And so in that case, being immortal, it's even though my current body will die, like animals do, it's I will come back, and that means that I'm not really dead. And so that means I don't have to treat life as if I'm gone in one shot. And even if I'm wrong about that, and I am gone in one shot, living as if I would come back and trying to be the best me and go as far as I can go in my own personal development, and leaving behind good things in the world, I can't see either of those as a lose. So it's a win even if I'm wrong. And so that makes it a really strong model, in that even if the model is factually incorrect, the outcome of the model was so much better that acting as if the model was correct was a better choice than the other choice. And there's no proving that you can't come back, and there's no proving that there wasn't anything after you die. And I'm not a big believer in like the life after death stories, and I've never paid attention to that. Although now with my new model, of course, I would support them as totally being possible. I just haven't known anything about it. I haven't thought about it. I don't think about it now. And so it's not a big deal to me, nor is, any of the real bad things that could happen to me, because I'll cope with them, because I've spent my life coping with bad things, and we all have to do it. So why worry about it? It's like we'll just get better and better at coping with them, and then try to do all the good things that we want to accomplish, as opposed to trying to avoid the bad things and ending up with a lot more bad things happening. So the immortality thing is new. That's interesting, and it's made a lot of different changes in my life, like doing this, and I'm doing some like kind of land law thing that I want to do, making like a zoning law, so that people can own their land forever without being taxed. I think that's very important for people to have a place to live and sleep, and be able to grow their own food that's healthy for them, and that makes them kind of not slaves, in that they have to work, or they just can't sleep someplace. They're homeless and they'll be taken by the police someplace else, and breaking the natural cycle that the sun and rain come and they grow plants which grow for free, and then you can eat the things right off the plants. It's like that's a natural cycle, and same as keeping animals and drinking their milk and eggs and things like that is a natural cycle, and it's all free. It just takes a little bit of time, and not really so much once it's set up. So these kind of things I'm starting to look into now, because I've got this new perspective, and opens up new plans, and it opens up a new kind of set of interests that previously I wasn't focused on, and I like it a lot better. So let's see, I have some notes here I'm just looking over. So the deluding thing, life after death thing, it's untrue. If it's untrue, it's not untrue. Oh yeah, wrap up. So this is just kind of getting things started. I figured I'd start here because it's the biggest change in my life, and the biggest change from anyone who would have known me any time in my life. And but it doesn't really change too much in a lot of ways. It just opens things up that previously had been kind of shut down, because all it is just doing more good stuff. So I'm not concerned if others follow me. I'm not doing this to try to encourage anyone to follow me, or do things like I do, or criticize or praise anyone or anything like that. It's just really communicating outward and getting a start on the communication, and something I think is important, and kind of showing a perspective I have, that you can choose how to live your life, and that the options that you think are available for you are not the only options. You can pick any options you want and live your life however you want. And the circumstances in which you live will dictate how that works for you, and you'll have to cope with whatever the results are, which could be good or could be bad, but you can choose. And I'm choosing to do something different, and I really like it, and I'm interested to see what it brings me. I think the hardest thing that I've had to deal with in kind of making this transition is actually listening to other people that do believe in God, and the differences they have in the way that they talk about it from the way that I think about it. Because the way that I think about it seems perfect to me. And so the way that other people talk about it, I have issues with, because it sounds wrong, because it's different than how I think about it. And I think that's one of these difficult things that's going to be hard to deal with, but it's going to be really rewarding when I can listen to other people talk about their own experiences and beliefs and interests, whether they believe in God or don't, and what kind of God they believe in, or what they do. It's like it's really opened my mind to being able to listen to other people, and that is good. It's good that I don't have to hang out with people who think a certain way and act a certain way and dress a certain way, and fits in with the way I want to be perceived or anything like that. I can be more open about those things, and I really like that change too. So so yeah, it's like I have a couple different ways of kind of expressing this. Like I said, I have the kind of model of how I think about God, and then I also have the kind of poetic way of saying, I believe in God, and I feel it's right. And the feeling part is not even poetic. It's just it just seems right. So I think that's it. That's the kind of first thing I wanted to talk about, and I just have a bunch of ideas of other things that I think would be interesting to put out there, and I was planning on waiting and writing a book about it, but why wait? Why not just get things out there now and see what happens? And maybe discussions will start up that are interesting, or I'll think of new things. But there's never a reason to delay doing something good. You can do the good thing and then do it better later. And so that's what this is: just getting something started and putting something out there, so that I can continue it up and follow up with more good things in the future. So thanks.